The Noble Rose. She is a pure-spirited warrior who prioritizes justice above all things. She is independent and fearless. She is exceptionally intelligent and she's always serious. Even though she's sometimes melancholy and austere, she commands a great deal of respect and admiration among her allies and enemies alike. This driven, determined, and virtuous heroine keeps the party alive, not only by protecting and healing them, but also by making rational, merciful, and analytical decisions that lead her posse into inevitable victory. The Noble Rose, with her valor and responsible attitude, may seem similar at first to the Valiant Protector archetype. However, there are some core differences in function and personality that set her apart. For instance, the Noble Rose tends to exhibit a very balanced perspective. She can see the big picture as easily as she can see at specific points, where the Valiant Protector tends to be more detail-oriented and more focused on individual tasks rather than a distant goal. The Noble Rose also tends to remain calm and cool-headed when under duress, and is much less inclined to lose focus than some of the other archetypes.
Yeah, more incident than accident. Something pulse-related.
Indeed, she is likely the most mature of the 10 archetypes.
The situation requires I accept such help as I find, though it be from thieves. I shall accompany you until we find my companions, no longer.
Although her personality most often has an unwavering severity about it, and she rarely smiles, the depth of her love and courage is fathomless. This woman cares for the party by giving them all tough love, and sometimes physically painful lessons. At first glance, she can occasionally seem cold or domineering, but she usually knows what's best for everyone in the long run, and her actions are ultimately just, reasonable, and above all else, kind. In Final Fantasy, the ladies who make up the Noble Rose archetypes are Rosa, Celeste, Beatrix, Ash, and Lightning. Each of them begin their quest from a place of very high power and influence. 3 are very high-ranking officers, and 1 is a prodigy cleric on the arm of the highest-ranking officer. These characters each have a devoted and nurturing side. They're maternal, but in a much different way from the supportive youth, who is maternal in the sense that she's extremely compassionate and giving. The Noble Rose shows a more mature, severe side of femininity. She is an unyielding force of nature, possessed of superior mental and emotional strength.
You trusted Sarah. Let that faith drive you.
Even though she is usually a woman of war, she always fights for peace, and she can always effectively use white magic. Whether she's destroying nations, singing opera, or busy being kidnapped, her radiance never dims for a second.
These people have done nothing. Release them!
What are you doing?
Don't interrupt me. I'm thinking.
The devoted companion. He is always there when you need him. He will help friends and strangers alike, with or without being asked. And he is always full of energy and enthusiasm. This archetype is a friendly, outgoing male who tries his best to be respectful, useful, and liked by the one he follows, who is usually the main character. He varies in levels of maturity, which is usually relevant to his age. Typically, the younger he is, the more he is seeking approval, and the older he is, the more independent he has become. But the bulk of his personality remains the same. He is focused on helping others, and sometimes has little or no ambition to do much else. This character usually does have a hobby, career, or pastime, or food that he's passionate about, although it tends to be something that requires him to help, protect, or work with others. But when given the choice between following his career or exciting dreams, or following the heroes on a bleak and dangerous quest, he will dependably choose the latter. The devoted companions of Final Fantasy are Ark, Young, Sabin, Zell, Quina, and Waka. They are all steadfast, humble, honest allies who are willing to sacrifice their immediate gratification for the greater good. Sometimes they even suffer for it. Ark from FF3, for example, was terrified the first time he encountered the ghosts in Kazus, and as a quiet, timid scholar would have been happier staying at home. Zell is another example. Squall is perpetually cold and dismissive with him, and he doesn't even get his beloved hot dogs until the very end. Although, let's not forget, while we're on the subject of food, the Quina from Final Fantasy IX, whose primary ambition appears to be food, spends the majority of the game starving and unable to find or try new foods, and feeding him is always optional. I will also remind you that Waka's sport of choice, Blitzball, is optional on all but one occasion. But just to backtrack for a minute, my placement of Quina may still seem illogical at first glance. for he/she may seem to care more about food than he/she does about Zidane or the quest, which may appear to be a contradiction to the supposed personality of the devoted companion, so I will explain my reason for this in more depth. It was based on some key moments in the game. When Zidane finds Quina and Lindblom after he washes ashore at the harbour, he helps to pay for the pickles that Quina has been eating, even though Quina has finally found something to eat. After hallucinating and falling unconscious from a lack of food, he says, "Thanks, Zidane! You my hero! I follow you forever!" And Zidane responds by hanging his head and saying, "Please don't." But Quina still wants to go with him, even though Queen has finally found food and has had verbal evidence that Zidane doesn't want to have him around. His primary objective is to trail behind his hero. One could argue that Quina doesn't understand that he is unwanted, and that he is only following Zidane because it may ultimately lead him to food. However, if we examine the story surrounding Quina and the genderless Q tribe, we will likely notice that the pursuit of food is definitely not unique to Quina. It is her way of life, and the thing that she is most frequently talking about, but it is something that defines the identity of her tribe, rather than Quina as an individual. In fact, the only trait that really sets Quina apart from the rest of his tribe is his friendship with Zidane and the other party members. When Quina follows Zidane through Gaia, and even takes the potentially deadly risk of riding the Path of Souls to the neighboring planet, not only does he virtually never find any new food to try, but there is also no obligation or promise of food compelling him to continue following the party. In fact, during the 2 active time events in which Quina does manage to get his hands on some grub, he does so independently of Zidane, and the places where he receives said food are always somewhere he has wandered off to on his own. These adoring friends still continue to follow behind the heroes even though it's rarely on their terms. The reason that the devoted companion chooses to partake in the quest varies, but it's never about him. It appears that the only thing he is consistently interested in is being near his friends. The true virtue of the devoted companion is not so much that he wants to help the world or the other characters, nor is it that he does so without any expectation of being paid back. His virtue is that he is truly living the way he wants to live. He doesn't want to exercise power over others because he already has power over himself. He is neither a martyr nor a victim, although he sometimes appears to be self-sacrificing. If we examine him more closely, we may notice that despite the fact that he is sometimes unable to assert himself, he has no shortage of self-respect. In reality, the devoted companion is in some ways the most self-aware of the archetypes. He is comfortable with who he is, and perfectly accepting of everyone else. It's not that he gives away his power, it's that he doesn't need to compete with others for attention or glory, although occasionally when his ego is badly wounded, he will feel the need to prove his courage or ability before he inevitably bounces back. The Magical Princess. This archetype is iconic to Final Fantasy as a series. She is a beautiful, compassionate, dreamlike maiden, a sensitive pacifist who wields unearthly powers and harbors unconditional love. The characters who belong to this mold are Adult Lydia, Lena, Terra, Eris, Runoa, Dagger, and Yuna. All of them are magic users, summoners, or in possession of a magical pendant. When the magical princess is not literally a princess, she is treated like one. She always needs protection, guidance, and emotional support, and there's a fairly legitimate reason for it. She is always getting into trouble. Usually the magical princess has the most connection with the spiritual and otherworldly corners of the Final Fantasy universe. Terra is half Esper, and from the Esper world. Eris is one of the dying out ancient Cetra. Yuna is on a high-profile sacred pilgrimage. Adult Rydia comes from the world of summons. They all have a past, a destiny, or a mission that is completely integral to the plot of the game, and for that they are almost always directly targeted by the main villain, as well as continually running up against a wide variety of trials, attackers, and meddlers. When the magical princess interacts with the other party members, she is usually filled with noticeable anxiety that she attempts to mask in order to appear strong to the other characters. Although she tends to be more optimistic and supportive than the noble Rose, she is considerably less enthusiastic and energetic than the supportive youth. She isn't exclusively serious, but she isn't overly playful either. In some ways, the magical princess is more naive than any of the other characters, for she knows only her own world and her own destiny, and she is rarely prepared for the trials that await her. The other party members typically like and respect her, but there is always an atmosphere surrounding her suggesting that she is different in some way. In some instances, she is untouchable, either literally due to her role or status, or figuratively due to the insurmountable differences between her and the rest of the characters and NPCs in the game. The anxiety that further separates her from the group is sometimes caused by a deeply rooted fear or prophetic awareness of an impending disaster, such as Lena's premonition of the breaking of the crystals. or the unhappy destination at the end of Yuna's pilgrimage. This coming event frequently involves her possible and inescapable death or destruction. She is often a sacrifice from the moment she is born, having to work for, marry, or be used and slaughtered by the enemy of her compatriots. Even though she regularly socializes with the other party members, she is always at least partially withdrawn, because her destiny is absolute, and her spiritual and existential trials are cripplingly hard. One of the things that most of the magical princesses have in common is their longing to feel normal and connected to the other party members. This is likely because the sheltered lives they've led have deprived them of much of the social and worldly experience that the other party members usually have in spades. Sometimes there is something that connects all of the party members and excludes her. Renoa, for example, is the only party member who does not come from the orphanage where Squall grew up, and she is the only one who is not a part of Seed. Other times she has a quality that is impossible to ignore, such as Terra's magic, causing her to be treated as something other than a normal human, although sometimes the attention is meant to be complimentary. Regardless of the help and advice of her friends and comrades, the magical princess will always be special, and will only find inner peace when she accepts what has happened or will happen to her and her planet.
When she is able to accept herself, her identity crisis will end, and she will become the playful, sweet, and slightly spunky woman she was always meant to be.
The mysterious stoic. She's smart, assertive, elegant, practical, and mature. This woman is usually either a tomboy or a vision of extreme femininity, or some fascinating combination of both. This is a woman who says few words and rarely acts without thinking. Sometimes, if you rub her the wrong way, this is a hardcore female who will beat you up. She doesn't like to chew the fat, and she has a busy schedule, but she usually has one person whom she's completely devoted to.
Yeah, I guess we will.
This woman always makes decisions with her head instead of her heart, even though her heart usually aches for someone, and she sometimes has trouble keeping her competitive nature in check, even though she's always got her own agenda. Once she fully commits to the quest the hero is on, she'll join and never leave. The mysterious stoics of Final Fantasy are Paris, Tifa, Quistis, Freya, Lulu, Fran, and Fang.
A dragoon knight, a voodoo mistress, 2 pirates, a military school teacher, an airship-riding, spear-wielding terrorist, and a boxing, gambling anarchist make up the roster of deep, dark, stoic matrons who answer to no one.
That's a good girl.
Stop grumbling! Let's go! So, can you handle my punches too?
Very little is ever known about many of these characters, and they're usually spending their time putting the other characters in their place. Typically they will be protective, affectionate, and tolerant toward the supportive youth and the magical princess. But everyone else is usually fair game.
You shouldn't have brought him here in the first place.
Yeah, but he needed our help.
Excuses again?
Yeah, but...
That's it. No more. Enough, Waka.
Have you finished? When the guards don't report in, they'll come looking for us.
This woman is only concerned with the greater good, and she does not succumb to manipulation, insults, or threat. She acts only of her own will and according to her own reason.
I'm dropping it.
And the input of others means very little to her in most cases. If the mysterious stoic has a problem, she will immediately attempt to solve it, and even though she tends to be a pessimist, she will never complain about her personal hardships. In short, she's a survivalist, and although she's carrying a well of desires and sorrows within her, they simply have to wait until her job is done. Primarily, this seems to be because the mysterious stoic is in danger of falling apart once her emotional floodgates are finally opened. There is evidence of this in Final Fantasy 7 and 8, when Tifa and Quistis attempt to share their feelings with the 2 most emotionally distant protagonists known to the series, only to be met with nonchalance and rejection. Both characters were intelligent enough not to let the rather predictable indifference of Cloud and Squall get the better of them, and both of them were only able to skim the surface of their true feelings before they were thwarted by third-party characters and outside events. An incarnation of the mysterious stoic will likely be in almost every Final Fantasy to come, because she is a useful plot device. She has a personality that enables her to fight the evils of her world without losing her mind or focus where others will fail. She is an asset to the party, providing them with motivation, strength, and reason.
How are we supposed to get through that?
I've talked enough about that. Interesting. I suppose I could add you to my list. I wish you good luck, little boy. You're going to need it.
Lost Youth.
He's typically a kid between 8 and 19. This is a boy who is a victim of circumstances, and he is quite often initially unimportant to the quest.
His relationship to the other characters is what makes him integral to the story, and if not integral, then at least involved. Usually the lost youth is unable to face up to his own reality. It's often the death of a loved one, but sometimes it's the nature of his own existence which frightens him. He tends to be a simple and sometimes even mundane person who has very basic wants and needs, and when he is confronted with a shocking tragedy or conflict, he enters a state of denial, rage, terror, or sorrow. The lost youths in question are Edward, Gao, Cloud, Vivi, Titus, Vaughn, and Hope.
Get me out, for the sake of Dalmasca.
Dalmasca? What do you care about Dalmasca? Everything that's happened is because of you! Everyone that's died, every single one! Even my brother! You killed my brother!
Quiet! The guards will hear.
That's why I'm just going to stay at Anna's side. It doesn't matter anymore. Nothing does.
You're not the only one who's grieving. Anna would not wish to see you fawning like a fool. Please, I have desperate need of your help right now.
But how could I help you?
You're running from what you deserve!
Why don't you tell me what I deserve?
The same fate!
母さんを、ティファを、村を返せ。あんたを尊敬していたのに、憧れていたのに。
Hey man, there's no way! That's just impossible! No, that's ridiculous! No way! I don't believe you!
I hate you, Dad.
Each of them has a question that needs answering that ultimately drives them to join the quest with the other characters, although they tend not to be aware at first of what that question is. For Gao, it's the death of his father and the rejection from his mother that has forced him to raise himself in the wilderness.
You'll cry. You're gonna cry. You always cry. See? You're crying.
For Cloud, Vivi, and Titus, the denial and shock caused by the truth about who they are drives them into a state of horror, sorrow, and anger. And for Edward, Vaughn, and Hope, the death of a beloved has led them to seek revenge or to attempt to escape from reality altogether. Usually, they all want to know why this has happened, who is responsible, what it means for them, and how to move on, where to move on to from there. Because of this, they are lost in the psychological wilderness, with no home, no purpose, and nothing to hold on to. It is likely that they join the quest to save the world because of their need to find a new focus, life, purpose, or meaning to replace or distract them from their despair. This seeking is usually what leads them, sometimes indirectly, to find the answers that they need. Compared to all the other archetypes, the lost youth is often seen as very inconsequential to the plot or the party. Although they tend to earn their place with their battle skills or relationships with the others, it seems perhaps unintentional. Vivi, for example, only wanted to see a play at the beginning of Final Fantasy IX. He did not ask to be taken to the evil forest, or to be created by Kuja in the first place, but as one of the notorious black mages, he is unable to exist naturally in society, and he must persevere in order to discover who he really is. Because of their consistent fear and shock, the lost youths are sometimes willingly ignorant to their own state of being. This can go further than simply remaining in a state of denial or attempting to blame a third party. Cloud, for example, has reached a point where he literally believes he is someone else, and needs the help of Tifa before he can recover from his delusion. Although Cloud starts the game as an accomplished warrior, and a very relevant character to the main plot, he started the timeline of Final Fantasy VII as a normal and practically expendable boy in a remote village. Perhaps the virtue of the lost youth is that he earns his place among the heroes through effort and hard work. After all, every character in Final Fantasy has to start from somewhere. Only a select few of them are undeniably possessed of a destiny, and it is plausible that in reality all of them have a destiny to become the warriors of light or darkness, and that they merely discover it in very different ways.
I know it wasn't your fault. I see that now. You didn't kill my brother.
The wise old fool. This archetype really began with Tella from Final Fantasy IV. Additionally, Gollups, Drago, Cid, and Sazh are wise old fools. They have a particular set of traits that set them apart. They're grumpy, comical, extremely stubborn, and determined. There's usually a person, often a child or grandchild, who they are ferociously protective of, and when that person is hurt or in any kind of danger, they are consumed with and often blinded by extreme wrath and vengeance. Despite his innate anger and criticism directed at some of the other characters, this archetype always has a good heart, and he is always willing to help when he is needed. The wise old fool often forgets or misinterprets little details, even though at least by the end of the game he will see the big picture. He can see the extent of the true evil and the injustice that he must fight. He knows that he needs to help the other characters to fight the powers that be, and he usually doesn't try to change the others or persuade them to follow another path, even if he doesn't share some of their opinions. It is usually a particular fact, hang-up, or event that prevents him from seeing the truth in clarity. An example of this would be when Strago from FF6, in his despair from thinking his granddaughter Relm is dead, joins the cult of Kefka, despite his awareness that Kefka is his true enemy. Another example would be when Tella attempts to exact revenge upon Golbez for killing his daughter, and needlessly destroys himself in the process.
Oh, we have to leave before the army. What?
That's a Pulse brand. That girl's a l'Cie.
I already told you that.
Pulse l'Cie are the enemies of Cocoon.
So they should die?
Listen, if she fails her focus, you know how that'll end. Turning myself in.
Huh?
I know they execute l'Cie, but... hey, they're not total monsters.
Once this character is able to sort his true friends from his enemies, and to forgive and accept those who have hurt him, he is able to relax and find happiness in himself. Sometimes this takes an entire lifetime, and sometimes he is able to see the truth more quickly. Sazh, for example, is able to move past his anger and hurt and to accept Vanille as a friend, even though she is indirectly the reason he loses his son Daj. Sazh is able to see the big picture. He knows that Vanille had no desire to become l'Cie, become Ragnarok, or to involve Daj, but before he embraces this, as the wise old fool is wont to do, he nearly kills her out of vengeance. This usually cranky archetype is someone who has spent his entire life devoted to a spiritual or intellectual job or cause, such as Gollup's involvement in sealing Exdeath, Tella's training as a sage, Cid's dream of space exploration, or Strago's hunting of the beast Hedon. They are skilled with machines, electronics, or magic, and they possess very noteworthy talents that provide the party's quest with unrivaled arcane strength, skill, or technology, and their need to shield and coddle the young from the true horrors of the world is a double-edged sword that progresses the story seamlessly.
Can't keep up with this girl.
This reinforces his strength and resolve, and consequently the closeness and trust of the entire party. The most notable overlaps I can think of are Cloud, Rosa, Rydia, and Cait Sith. Cait Sith I found to be unplaceable. He seems similar to the Maverick. The personality that he is given by Reeve, the man who controls him, is silly and could perhaps be viewed as sarcastic when compared with Reeve's true sober and stern nature, and taking into account that Reeve initially set out to spy on the party rather than help them. In addition, the fact that although Reeve is part of Shinra, he is rebelling against it, makes him appear to move against the grain in several ways. However, the personality of Cait Sith as we see him in the majority of the game is silly, mischievous, and carefree, making him more similar to the treasure hunter. However you look at it, Cait Sith is both an actor, like Zidane in Law, and a defector, like Kain in Amaranth, and he doesn't particularly belong to one archetype more than the other. In the case of Rydia and Rosa, there sort of seems to be a transition from youthful support to magical princess to noble rose. I've observed this transition in several other characters as well, but it seems to be most prominent in these two. Now Cloud.
Cloud is a mess.
That is primarily why he got labeled as a lost youth, but here's a cross-section of that mess. I will concede that Maverick might have been a better choice, but standing next to Vincent, Cloud seems pretty darn innocent.
来てくれたんだ。約束守ってくれたのね。
Thank you for watching part 5 of Final Fantasy: The Psychology and Philosophy. The next episode is going to be about the music of the series.